On the 7th day of the 9th moon, Viz Leany made port at Vertel to acquire trade goods and supplies for the refugees before heading north to meet with Sea's Wrath and returning the refugees home. Nearly a week later, Viz Leany arrived at the remains of Calica, and the two crews assisted the refugees as they began to rebuild their homes and caravans. Sitara took Viz Leany north to alert her family of the threat of the Tatuan raiders, and returned to Calica with some of the Krejci, who had offered to help the Laranovna rebuild their caravan.
Akash approached Dasha's grandmother, Ludmila, their family elder, and showed her the ancient Awami text, telling her the Krejci elder, Dragica, had suggested he ask her help with the translation. As thanks for the crew saving her family, Ludmila agreed to translate the remainder of the script, though she too cautioned him that such beings, the Sakarza, were not to be trifled with.
Dasha finally revealed to her friends the story of the creature who had driven the Laranovna clan west from their home paths, the reason behind her leaving her clan in the first place. Not long after Dasha suffered her miscarriage, she and her dear cousin Natalia went foraging in the woods some distance away from their caravan. They were exploring an unfamiliar grove when they were ambushed by a creature that loomed over even Dasha, possessed with a savage fury. In a flash, the monster had struck down Natalia, and Dasha barely escaped with her life. But she admitted to having no way to fend off the beast, and her family did not blame her for the tragedy. She had never forgiven herself for what had happened that day. Haunted by the nightmares of that fateful day, she no longer felt safe in the forest she had called home. Between that and the devastation of losing her only child, as well as her best friend, Dasha decided to leave her tribe and her fiancé, setting out to the west.
Sitara, Akash, Kusumi, and Mezi offered to hunt the monster, so the Laranovna could return to their home paths. The journey inland and back would not be brief, but neither was rebuilding the caravan. Masha, her task of returning Dasha to her family now complete, offered her assistance, along with the Tatuan expatriate, Iphigenia. Though Dasha was visibly apprehensive, she agreed. On the 9th of the 10th moon, everyone took a break from work to celebrate Sitara's birthday. Over the next few days, the crew gathered supplies and prepared for the trip inland. On the morning of Akash's birthday on the 14th, they bid farewell to the freed slaves. Idowu Idir, whom the freed slaves had elected their captain, told them Sea's Wrath was bound for the Free Isles, and that they would never forget what Viz Leany had done for them and the refugees. After seeing them off, the party began their journey east, into the depths of the Awami forest. The expedition party walked for weeks through the wilderness, taking a day to celebrate Mezi's birthday on the 5th of the 11th moon. Though their travel was smooth, as the days passed, the amiable and easygoing Sitara seemed to grow restless and oddly peevish. By the time of the fallen sailor Namat's birthday, on the 23rd, she was on edge, snapping at the slightest annoyance.
On the 24th of the 11th moon, Dasha found herself in familiar territory. Frighteningly familiar. They were passing by that large, twisted root she'd tripped over, the cluster of saplings she had broken as she went barreling through them, and soon a thicket of red berries bordering a large grove. "Here," she whispered. The party exchanged wary glances before pressing forward, the silence between them taut as a bowstring, until it was broken by an impatient sigh. To everyone's horror, the captain began to complain loudly that there was nothing here, this beast would never be found, and they should have never come. As Sitara's griping echoed in the unsettling quiet of the grove, Akash stopped mid-stride as he realized it was not only the woods that were mute. For the first time in his life, he could no longer hear the whispers of the Jinn. In that moment of utter isolation, something huge dropped from the canopy. It struck the forest floor with a thunderous crack before swatting Kasumi and Akash across the clearing, and the party beheld the creature that had haunted Dasha's nightmares. A great, hulking mass that stood like a man, rippling with ligneous muscle and viney sinew, with two dark eyes glaring from beneath gnarled brows which extended from its crown into two branch-like antlers. Iphigenia and Mezi pierced the beast with their spears, trying to hold it even as the monster slashed at them with its claws. Masha attempted to stab the beast, but her knives couldn't pierce its knotted hide, and those who did manage to wound the creature watched in horror as the gashes slowly closed, seeming to mend themselves. Sitara took a running leap at the creature, driving her swords into its back, and began the arduous climb towards its head. Akash called on the winds to overturn the creature, but was suddenly ensnared by vines erupting from the earth beneath his feet. Kasumi loosed some arrows at the beast and freed Akash from the entangling vines before joining the captain, using his shuko to scale the beast's massive form. Dasha quickly gathered a bundle of incense and called to the creature to calm itself. Cries of Sakarza seemed to grab the creature's attention, bringing the battle to an uneasy standstill for a brief moment as it stared at her. Kasumi, perched on the creature's back, sensed it was about to charge Dasha and called upon the Mon's power as he raked his claws across its face, gouging out chunks and leaving visceral scars as the beast howled in pain. Once more, Akash called upon the wind, but his muted power was unable to topple the beast, instead driving Mezi off her spear and forcing Sitara off the beast's back, though she was able to grab a hold of one of the beast's antlers just in time. And once again, vines sprang forth, latching onto Akash. He tried to launch himself into the air to escape the vines, but it only drew more foliage to him, almost completely smothering him. Sitara, dangling precariously next to the creature's head, drew her boot knife and thrust it into the eye of the monster. In a rage, the creature slammed Sitara against a tree and rampaged about the clearing. Masha and Mezi managed to grab hold of Mezi's spear, still implanted in the creature's chest, and together they tore the spear free before diving aside to escape its wild swings. Taking advantage of the distraction, Iphigenia leapt at the beast, taking a hold of her own implanted spear while driving her sword into the gap left by Mezi's. Kasumi attempted to move, but found himself pinned by the creature's shoulder blades as it thrashed about. Sitara swung herself back atop the beast to assist him as Masha ran to try and help Akash escape the creeping vines. Mezi rushed to defend Dasha from the creature's attacks, and they watched in shock as the creature shot up into the air with Sitara clinging to its back, Kasumi stuck to its neck, and Iphigenia clutching to her weapon stuck in its chest. As the beast plummeted, about to crush Dasha, Mezi went to grab her and dive out of the way when Dasha took hold of Mezi's spear and braced herself, aiming it at the descending form of the creature. Like a meteor, the monster crashed into the ground, Sitara and Kasumi managing to jump off the creature at just the last moment. However, Iphigenia and Dasha disappeared, buried beneath the beast's form. Hoping against hope, they watched the creature slowly begin to push itself up, revealing the broken remains of Mezi's spear lodged in its jaw. As everyone tried to recover from the impact, Sitara drew her skinned-and-clad dagger and slid beneath the beast as it started to rise. As she drove the long knife into the beast's other eye, she felt the blade grow hot and heard a sound like the shattering of crystal. Seemingly blinded, the creature thrashed about. Sitara circled the beast, looking for a window to retrieve her weapons, all of which were now buried within it. Dasha, realizing that the creature was no longer healing from its wounds, started lighting torches for the archers in the group. Weary of fighting his bonds, Akash vowed that he would find the Sakara Zoroska, and seemingly in response, the beast leapt upon him, driving him into the ground. When Dasha called out to get its attention, it turned to charge her instead. As it broke away from Akash, the archers opened fire with flaming arrows. It swatted aside Iphigenia's arrow, and Mezi's was extinguished, but Kasumi's arrow struck true, finding the gap created by Iphigenia's sword. As the flames touched it, the creature erupted into an inferno before crashing at Dasha's feet. It burned briefly but intensely, and soon nothing was left of the creature but ash.
Making camp, Mezi set out to find shelter and water. Finding a stream running outside a large cave, she returned to camp to help tend to her companions. The next day, the party decided to explore the cave Mezi had discovered, though the rest had to convince their querulous captain and indifferent accountant to go along. Once they arrived, Sitara and Kasumi sat impatiently at the cave entrance while Mezi, Akash, and Dasha ventured inside. After passing through the mouth of the cave, it opened into a voluminous cavern with a lofty ceiling and apertures in the rock on either side, through which rays of light shone. As the trio explored deeper, they discovered a large stone formation at the back of the cavern. Having realized that others were out of easy reach, Sitara and Kasumi soon followed and stepped into the cavern to find their companions gathered around the odd formation. Unimpressed, Sitara berated her companions for wasting their time. As the party started to leave, Akash said he felt something strange in the stone. Examining it closer, Akash could swear there was a seam running around the stone near the top. Seeing no such thing, Satara and Kasumi were dismissive, but Akash convinced Dasha and Mezi to help him try and move it. They pushed and pushed until, with the grinding of stone, the seal broke.
Lifting and sliding the stone lid aside, they were blinded by a burst of prismatic light from within the stone. As their vision cleared, the party discovered the strange formation was hollow. Inside was a large sphere, which appeared to be made of innumerable pieces of colored glass, each fragment pulsing with its own light. While the rest stared in astonishment and uncertainty, Akash reached out and, before anyone could stop him, placed a hand on the sphere. The sound of tinkling glass echoed in the cavern as the shimmering orb began to expand, rising up out of its chamber. The kaleidoscopic sphere began to spin above them until it seemed to unfurl, revealing a statuesque figure with alabaster skin and a mane of platinum hair, clad only in a wrap of iridescent cloth and sandals which were laced about his calves. From his back spread a pair of enormous wings of the same shards of colored glass that glowed when no light shone through them. The towering figure stepped forth from the chamber, regarding each of the crew. Slowly, he reached out to each in turn, though his hand never touched them. Looking upon this wondrous entity, Akash knew this must be the one of which he had read, he of broken glass, and wondered truly if he stood in the presence of one of the Jinn themselves. Addressing the majestic figure of Sakar Zarozka, Akash excitedly welcomed him, waxing lyrical about how he had long sought such legends as this.
As the figure approached Mezi, she was struck by a feeling that she knew more than she thought, and felt a lightness in her chest that belied the weight of the mind.
Satara gazed up at the majestic figure in awed obeisance. Surely this being could be an avatar of Visitori, or an aspect of the dream. The kaleidoscope of colored light that passed across her vision as he stretched his wings evoked the window of her cabin, and she felt another pang of longing. As he looked on her, his expression shifted slightly, and she felt all of the aggravation, the vexation she'd been carrying, simply melt away, until all that was left was the serenity of the memory of home.
Kasumi, upon seeing the giant alabaster being, asked, "What are you?" The being held out his hand, exuding pure power, not harming Kasumi, but imparting a sense of overwhelming strength. Next to this, Akash's strongest gusts of wind felt nothing more than a gentle breeze, leaving Kasumi speechless. The crew followed the figure, walking slowly towards the cavern entrance, their spirits alight in his presence. Stepping out of the cave, the being seemed to bask in the sunlight before regarding the crew one final time, and launching himself into the heavens, quickly lost to sight. Though Kasumi reacted strongly to the being's departure, as he felt he was owed some answers, the others returned to the stone chamber to marvel at its remaining contents. Inside lay a wealth of artifacts, which Kasumi meticulously catalogued. With Akash's help, they determined which of the treasures had some kind of occult power. There was an assortment of exceptional gems and jewelry that didn't emit any supernatural energy, but certain items seemed to possess some trace of power. The first two items, a monocle and a mirror, both revealed some hidden nature of whatever they viewed, and proved useful in reviewing the other treasures. A dark wood spear, which was perfectly balanced, and its blade razor sharp, gave off a spiritual energy, but they could discern no more about its power. They found a set of 4 crystal goblets and a large bowl of the highest quality, a set of rough ember-colored gems which gave off a faint warmth, as well as a necklace set with a rainbow of gemstones, finer than anything Akash had ever produced. Dasha claimed a set of robes, which appeared to be made from the same iridescent material as the being's wrap, as she was the only one of large enough stature to don them. Finally, Akash came upon a flawless blue orb, the gemstone he had set out to find, the Bateria Cerule. Loot in hand, the party returned to camp and took the rest of the day to process everything that had transpired. They set out for the coast the next morning, on the 25th of the 11th moon.
The first fortnight of their journey back to Calica passed uneventfully, but as the days crept by, the party once again found Satara growing irritable. One evening, after chastising Kasumi for cataloging their findings from the cave yet again, She knocked aside his inkstone and brushes and stormed out of the camp, heading west. Akash followed after, demanding to know the reason for her behavior, while Sitara insisted that they were taking too long. All this stopping and resting was slowing them down, and she would go on ahead. Despite her protests, Akash attempted to restrain her with his magic. Furious, Sitara resisted and quickly broke free before he called to the winds again, suspending her upside down in the air. In a peculiar moment, her temper seemed to break. She relented and agreed to return to camp, although she lamented that her friends just didn't understand that she needed to get back. Somewhat snippy still, Sitara seemed to channel her agitation into being the first to rise in the mornings, and the last to retire in the evenings. Once the party broke out of the forest's edge, and they saw the glistening ocean in the distance, Sitara took off at a run. Reaching the beach, she dove into the sea, joyfully splashing in the waves until the rest of the party caught up, and they continued down the coast south.
After returning to Calica, the village held a celebration in honor of its heroes. Many times they recounted their battle with the wrathful forest spirit, and their encounter with the wondrous being with wings of colored glass. Each rendition became more and more elaborate, as stories are wont to do, especially under the influence of Alami's spiced ciders. Mezi and Kasumi drank themselves into a stupor, while an earnest and tiddly Sitara led Dasha and her fiancé Ermilai into a heartfelt discussion, though they hardly required assistance. Later that evening, the captain urged Dasha to consider carefully. While she would always be welcome aboard Viz Leany, she would always be part of the crew. Sitara advised Dasha to take her time and make certain her choice would not be one she would later regret.
Iphigenia spent some time smithing for the village and working with Akash on her crafts. He donated a ruby to her greatest project, that she might craft a sword to surpass the one she carried. Setting her sights on furthering her skill, Iphigenia said her farewells, planning to travel south to set up shop in Patel. Masha also took her leave to accompany Iphigenia on her journey, promising to warn the desperate Dacian lords of the threat of Tautog raiders. Though Masha was skeptical they would reasonably be moved to any real course of action. Besides, there were always worked bounty hunters in Patel.
Ultimately, Dasha decided to remain with her family, who were nearly prepared to return inland to their home paths. On the 15th of the first moon, Dasha and the crew exchanged their goodbyes, some more sentimental than others. While Akash declared he would not miss his feathery rival, Kanuki made certain to give Grim one last pet. Sitara, who had come to regard Dasha as a sister, bade her farewell with a glimmer in her eyes. Kasumi even managed to give Dasha an impressively civil well-wishing before their departure. And they bid the goats farewell. They were to remain with Dasha to help the Laranovna replenish their livestock, much to the sadness of some, and to the relief of many. On the 1-year anniversary of Viz Leany embarking on her maiden voyage, she set sail, turning her bow back towards Rakosis.
Of the greater beings, perhaps the most enigmatic are the Sikarza. Known to be powerful beyond measure, their goals are known only to themselves and the dreamer. Of those known, it is said the greatest was the one called the Sikarza Rozka, or He of Broken Glass. Beautiful and terrible in equal measure, the Sikarza Rozka went to the children of the dreamer to guide them in the way of things. Few stories are told of the Sikarza Rozka, though it is said he was garbed in the light of the dreamer and was closest to him of all beings, guiding with a gentle hand and swiftly destroying those who angered him for unknown slights. Those he was sent to guide came to worship him instead of the dreamer. Angered by their foolishness, the Sikarza Rozka rebuked them and cast them down. In recompense, the peoples gave offerings to the Sikarza Rozka. Amongst those offerings were the vestments of the faithful, including the Batiri Sarul, the stone of the sky. How the people came by such artifacts is not known, nor is it known how the Sikarza Rozka reacted to the offerings, be it graciously or gravely. It is unknown what became of the Sikarza Rozka, or any of his ilk, as they have not been seen in the lands of our family for many ages. Nor is it known what became of the offerings the people gave, though it is believed they were left behind in this world when the peoples were no more. Of the other Sakarza, even less is known. Even their number and path are lost to us. It is known they were all of great mien, impossible to mistake for even the most impressive of peoples. Their garb was their own, though crafted by the dreamer or of their own imagination, it is impossible to say. Though they appear in the dreams of the family from time to time, the Sakarza are lost to us. Much as our homes were lost to us in the mists of the past, there are yet signs the dreamer gives to lead us. There will be a light, followed by darkness, and all peoples must be ready to follow the light held aloft. As the peoples yearn to find what will be their new homes, so too must the family set out from our well-worn paths for the world the dreamer has prepared for us. In this world there will be many wonders and terrors. If we are to survive, we must find the spires which will shelter and comfort us. In this new world we may yet find what is lost, though what price we will pay may be beyond measure. We must hold to the dreamer and know that all nightmares pass, and that even during the darkest night, and though we may not see it, the dreamer guides us and watches over us always.